Casual Magic has been brought to you by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can get cool stuff. Use the code CASUAL for 5% off your order. We're also sponsored by Quiver Time, makers of the Quiver and Bolt deck cases and other fine card holding accessories. Use the code CASUAL on their site for 10% off your purchase. And by Architect, a deck hosting website that doesn't sell anything, but they like me and I like them, so kindly use them for all your deck list needs. Now, on to the show. Hello and welcome to Casual Magic, the show where we talk about the fun side of Magic the Gathering. My name is Shivan Putt, and Casual Magic is brought to you by Cool Stuff Inc., Quiver, and Architect. Today, I have a very special guest, my fellow MTG ambassador, winner of the Brainstorm down in GP Las Vegas. Well, not really GP Las Vegas, I guess MagicCon Las Vegas, but I mean, the $100,000 thing was basically a GP inside of that, and the Secret Lair thing felt like another GP inside of that. So, but MagicCon Las Vegas most recently, and also doing things like the Modern Super League and like guerrilla coverage of random cons and events all over the place. I don't know. I feel like I've seen you doing like just coverage of like, I don't know, Laughing Dragon events in Oakland and just random things. But my boy Anuraag Das, what's up, bro? How's it going? Thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, I'm absolutely stoked to be here. This has been a long time coming. I mean, we've just been like ships
Hovering
sailing in the
around
night.
each other.
Yeah, exactly, right? And finally, just like we made it happen. You know, it's funny because like after all of that, like just you and I, being around each other, it's a tweet. It's just like, yo, you want to record tonight? And I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Yeah.
Sometimes I've learned that sometimes you just need to be direct. You just need to be like,
oh yeah.
Don't try to be fancy words. Just be like, hey, do you have an hour tonight? Do you want to just tape with me? And people are like, yeah, that sounds fine.
It's so simple. Yeah.
It makes it so much easier than like I had Magali on my show and I wrote this long flowery email and this whole like describing myself. She's like, oh, I know who you are. Sure, I'll come on. I'm like, well, God damn it.
Yeah, right. Just like 2 sentences is sufficient. Yeah, for sure.
What's funny to me is that we met for the first time coming off an airplane from, I think, GP Philly.
Oh, yeah.
MagicCon Philly. It was like 11 o'clock at night on a Sunday in SFO or something. And you're
yeah,
like, oh my goodness. Is that you? And I'm like, who the hell? Because the thing that was wild is that MagicCon is the first time in my life. So I was at the airport. I was going into the security line, and I get pulled aside by security to get checked. We're Magic players. We get our bags checked all the time. Some dude behind me in the security line was like, "Oh my God, you're Shivan. Can you sign something?" And I'm like, "Bro, right now, all of my pens are being checked by that very large security man from TSA. No, this is not a good sign."
It's like, not the time, not the place. Later, sure, but just
look, man. I've done the bathrooms. I've done been asked in weird and awkward places. Like I was sitting there eating. Okay, my favorite Philly story. I'm sitting there. It's quiet. I'm eating in like the food court across the street from the place, and I'm just like, finally, I get some time alone. There's like dude and his girlfriend are over here and they're having a chat and stuff. And like a bunch of people around me, none of them look like they have anything to do with magic. So I'm just sitting there eating. I finish my food. I stand up. The second I stood up, that dude jumps out of his chair. Oh my God, I'm a huge fan. I just didn't want to bother you while you were eating. And I flip my food over and I'm covered in Thai curry. And I'm like, what the hell? Bro, that's like 3 seconds more and you would have been in the clear.
Oh no.
It was so funny. Oh my God. But yeah, seriously, security line? No, I'm not that nice.
I'm taking some notes right now. Okay, not in the middle of pre-check. Yeah.
Right. But yeah, it was wild because like I didn't realize you lived literally so close to me and that we just never hung out. But
yeah. I actually moved here a couple years ago. So I've been around the country like a lot. Like I grew up in Houston, went to Georgia for school. Yeah. And then, flew to DC, lived in San Diego, finally moved up to San Francisco.
Damn,
my wife got
that is a planet, man.
It's a lot. It's been great because I've met a lot of people. That's the coolest part. And then I've just got to see a lot of the country. I've never lived like really like in the Midwest-ish. I mean, Houston, I'd probably call that
Houston
more
is not the Midwest.
Yeah, it's like the South, right? Yeah. But maybe who knows? Like a decade from now, you might find me there. So
where in Houston were you?
So I lived in Sugarland is where I grew up. Yeah, and then
that's where all the Gujaratis are.
Exactly. Yeah. So where all the brown people are, and then we moved to Memorial at some point because like my mom's work or something like that.
Yeah, I only asked because like my cousins grew up in Katy, so I spent a lot of summers Going to Houston, Texas in the summer is not. I don't know what my parents were thinking. They're like, "Go spend time with your cousin." I'm like, it's the worst time of the year,
Oh my god, no.
soggy and the giant mosquito. Anyways, not the point. Um, so the thing that brought you to my attention, because honestly, you and I don't run in the same circles magic wise, right? Like you're
Mm,
far more hardcore into like the competitive scene. You're far more invested in that side. I love watching competitive magic, which is how I ran into you because I heard your voice doing coverage on like some GP or some event, some tournament somewhere, and I'm like, that's another brown dude talking
yeah.
about magic. That's like there are
Ooh.
very few of us, and it's like so I pay attention, and I was like, holy crap, you know a lot about like modern and legacy and like hardcore eternal formats, and I was like, okay, I want to know who you are. So, where did you discover magic?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I used to play other card games a long time ago. I think like my journey, and like I don't know how much detail of you want. I can give you a lot. Yeah, but growing up, I was always like on the. I was a dork. All right, I'm gonna say it. Like, and I was happy with it. Like, eighth grade, I'd come in with my rolling backpack. So naturally, like, video games, card games, like they just like they appeal to me.
Sure.
In high school, my friend introduced me to Yu-Gi-Oh. He introduced me to two decks. He took the better one. I always lost, and I was like, and he'd brag about it too. So I was like, all right, I'm not losing, and that's like when it sparked, right? Just like the competitive mindset. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, in college, nobody played Yu-Gi-Oh, so I kind of like forced myself to get into Magic, and it was great. Like I
You remember
remember
what
you.
set that was?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was RTR. That was my first set, Return to
Oh,
Ravnica. Yeah.
wow.
So I'm a relative baby,
Yeah,
when it comes
that's
to
very
Magic.
recent, man. Well,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean,
So
I
like
say
10 years
that.
ago, but
Yeah, I mean, like, I say that, but I came back to Magic from my long break with, like, Innistrad, so RTR is not exactly it's like the next set over,
oh,
right?
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
two
They're
sets
pretty close.
over.
They're pretty close.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so it's yeah, cool. But, yeah,
yeah.
RTR block was a great block. If you're gonna pick Magic to start with,
Oh yeah.
that stretch of time was probably the best you could have done.
Yeah, the first deck that I picked up was like the blue white red flash deck had like Augur, Abolus, Snapcaster Mage, Restoration Angel.
They don't make them like they
Naturally,
used to,
yeah.
man.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, no, for day one, oh yeah, it was rough, but I had a great time, yeah.
Did you find yourself attracted to more constructive formats, like, from the get-go? Or were you, like, trying
Um
limited stuff?
That's a really good question. I guess so. I never like even to this day, like I haven't really dived into limited. I think like the most that I've ever gotten into limited was like for the recent Pro Tour, like in Philly, because like
Mm.
I was working that one, and then I had to learn some of the cards and things like that. But I don't know. I think like the mysteries of constructed have always appealed to me, and it was like the easiest parallel from one game to Magic,
That
and
makes
so I was like,
sense.
yeah, I was like, so okay, I'll start here, and then eventually I'll get to limited. 10 years later, never got into it.
I mean, it took me a long time to get into limited, and a lot of listening to, like, Marshall and LSV would be
Mm,
like, "Hey, you should draft." And I'm like,
yeah.
"What if I draft?" Turns out I actually just like limited a lot because the card pool is limited. Limited means there's less choices and less confusion, and you have to work with what you got,
Hmm.
which because I find constructed just really intimidating, which is weird coming from a guy who's such a commander head, and I've got my other card pool is 30,000 cards wide,
Yeah.
my
Right.
limited card pool is 30 cards wide, but, like, you give me 60 cards, I'm just lost, I don't know what to do. Um, and because 'cause I'm curious, one question I've been asking a lot of the folks who I know who are hardcore into, like, constructed stuff is when a new set comes out, what is your like, how do you look at it? Like, how do you look at it in terms of constructed, in terms of building new decks? Do you take existing shells that you have and see, like, what would slot into here? Or do you look at them and see, like, "Oh, this looks like something that I could build around?"
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think for me specifically, like this is I mean, okay, I guess it's not. I might not be the worst person to ask this question to, but I will say that my perspective is extremely skewed. So
Mm.
specifically, like I've had a history just playing control. Like I used to play a lot of decks. One day I was like, you know what? I want to play the deck that gives me the best opportunity to grow as a player. All right, we're picking blue, we're picking white, and we're on the stack. Yeah. So when it comes from set to set, it's always, looking at cards in from the lens of like these control decks and just like sort of analyzing, okay, is this playable?
So
Like,
when you
okay,
say the best lens to grow as a player, you mean in physical time because of how long it takes you to play that deck, right?
pretty much, yeah, 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 yeah. Oh yeah, and back then it was like Sensei Divining Top and Counterbalance, so
Jesus
a
Christ. Okay, bro.
really long
We're gonna
time.
be
Yeah,
miracling all day long. Let's go.
yeah.
But yeah, no. So you basically, so do you look at something like when Lord of the Rings came out?
Mm.
Were you like, did you see Bowmasters right away and go like, oh, I need to figure something out around this, or like when everybody started playing that stupid draw three cycle for one,
Mm.
Lost Glory and whatever, I was like, I just saw that as a limited card. I didn't realize that every constructed format on the planet would want like 4 copies of that.
Oh
Or
yeah.
like we had been recently talking about Beanstalk, which was a card that helped you win the Brainstorm, right? And so, how do you look at that card and say like, "Yo, I need this for like every format I play"?
Yeah, that's tough. It's really just speculation, right? Like, so
Mm,
there's certain cards that I just don't touch. Like, so when you're mentioning Bowmasters, I looked at that card and I was like, rather than like looking at it and being like, oh, this is such a sweet card, I kind of looked
mhm.
at it and I was just like,
Oh, this
oh
could
my
kill me.
god, everyone playing this card is gonna be so good against me. You know what I mean? But then I saw like Lorien and I was just like, wow, this solves a lot of the problems that I've been thinking about for my modern and legacy decks. I just can't wait to try it out. And there's always like that giant like asterisk mark, which is like, all right, I don't think it's gonna be like that great, like for the One Ring, for example, right? Even in
Mm.
Legacy, like everybody knew it was gonna be insane in Modern. I was like, all right, let's try one copy in Legacy and see where it goes. Wait a minute. All right, we're gonna try two, three, and then suddenly four. So it really is just like finding that hunch and then just like actionably like following up on it, which sometimes takes a little bit of effort and courage to try out, I suppose.
Yeah. There was an interesting article because Frank Karsten did a roundup of all of the big events that had happened in Vegas, and one of them was talking about your tournament. And the sentence that stuck out to me was like, "This is the this is proof of the true heart of modern, which is not taking the best deck, but taking one deck, grinding it out over 10 years, finding the little incrementals, and then just slowly growing it and evolving it. Like you're a control master. You're known as like being really, really fundamental in
Slow.
like yeah,
Okay.
in Azoria's Bantland, but just like taking just onesie twosies from here and there and just evolving your deck slowly. That's one of the things I love about like Commander, for instance, or other Eternal formats. But with modern like Horizons and stuff, it's so hard to not want to just shift over to Ragavan and all the other crazy things. How do you stick to your guns?
So this is actually really interesting. This goes back to my time in Legacy, and I'll just give you a little bit of history.
Yeah, actually,
When I
we skipped over that. How do you get into Legacy, man? Like,
Yeah, I'll tell you. I'll start off with Brainstorm. That card is a hell of a drug. I'll tell you that much. I started playing Legacy in 2014. So I told you I started playing RTR 2013.
what the
I jumped.
hell?
I know. I
What?
jumped. I jumped into Modern. Playing Birthing Pod of all decks, which is not blue or white,
I
and
love
then
okay, Modern Pod in 2013 era is like the
so cool,
greatest deck of all time, though.
so cool. Yeah.
Oh my god, it's one of my favorites. Anyways, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and so I think around the time as a growing player, I was hungry. I was just like digesting every single piece of content that I could, and obviously, like one of the most prominent pieces of content back then was like just like the Star City Games events, right? Every
Yes,
Saturday it
yes.
would be like that one day standard open, and then every Sunday it would be Legacy. And at first, I was into standard, and I was like watching all of those, and I was like, Legacy. I don't know what that is, but then one day I was like, all right, I'll watch it. And then the next day I was like, I gotta play this deck.
Yeah,
Um,
right?
yeah,
Which deck
and
was it
it
that
was
grabbed you first?
Esper Deathblade. And so that was
Jesus
like
Christ, okay.
Deathrite Shaman into like Stoneforge Mystic, Thoughtseize, Jace the Mind Sculptor. It's just like a giant mush of like the best cards, and it looked so sweet. So
Yeah,
that's
you
how I
know
got into
the
Legacy.
yeah, I'm sorry, the Star City Games Legacy Tournament card deck that I like, I used to watch all those because that was my, like, mowing the lawn, days. I would put the
Mm,
headphones on and listen to Patrick and, just do the commentary, but it was Feline Longmore's, the,
High
High
Tide.
Tide. Oh
Yeah.
my god, that is, like, one of the coolest combo decks I've ever seen in my life, and I was like, I need whatever that is in
Feline,
my life.
as a side note, is like one of the, like it will she will always be like just ingrained in my memory. 'Cause have you ever seen her play like ponders, like how she resolves them with the insane dexterity? She'll pick up three cards and then just like literally shuffle
Yeah,
them with one hand. I was like, if
it's
only I could do that.
Feline
Percentage.
Longmore is my example of the what happens when you are a single deck master, not just
Yes.
like
Oh yeah.
transcendent master. Like her deck, her hands on that deck is just insane to watch. It's like art. It's seriously one of my favorite things to. Watching it resolve like time trials is one of my favorite things to do.
Oh, yeah.
Just clear it.
I Tell me about it.
I love
But
Legacy so much.
yeah.
Yeah, but I'm just glad you didn't say, "Yeah, I started with Delver." I'm like, "Of course
Oh,
you
no. No, 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 no. Yeah,
did."
even now, sometimes I'll play Delver, I'll be like, "Bleh," yeah.
Uh,
Um,
creatures? Why would I like creatures? Uh, yeah,
but,
but yeah, you were
um,
talking about Legacy and getting into it, and then we were talking about, like
Esper Deathblade,
yeah,
yeah.
Esper Deathblade and, like, Lothlorien and Bowmasters and things.
Mhm. Yeah, so my story continues. So, I played Esper Deathblade for a while. That was really cool, but then I moved on to Shardless Bug, and I was like, "Okay,
Mm.
this is kinda cool," but I had this person in my, like, local Magic club who would always beat me with, like, old school four-color loam with, like, Knight of the Reliquary
Ah,
was it is it Devastating Dreams, the red X spell? Do you know what I'm talking about? It's like discard a bunch of lands, and then every player like has to sacrifice that many lands or something. It's like really old school tech. I kept losing to that deck, and then I switched over to Show and Tell. And
wow,
at
I've
some,
never heard of Devastating Dreams before. From Torment,
yeah,
yeah.
it's a
It's
sick card. Yeah,
red
yeah.
sorcery, you discard X cards at random from your hand, and then everybody sacks X land, and it does X damage to each creature. That's awesome, actually. That's
Terrifying.
insane. What
Literally
the
could
hell
not
is
beat
that?
that. Yeah.
Jesus. Okay. Legacy, man, using the weirdest cards on the planet. I love it.
I'm for it. Um, but what I noticed with Show and Tell, and Show and Tell and I, we had a 9-month relationship, and I was just like, you know what, Show and Tell, you're great and all, but today my opponent cast him to Torok against me, and there was just nothing I could
GG's.
do. Yeah,
No,
I
there
know.
wasn't.
Yeah, like no agency at all. And around the same time, you might know this person. He wrote this fantastic article. His name is Reed Duke,
Mm.
and he wrote an article, and it was "I found the secret to legacy." And I mean, I obviously that was like the best clickbait title. You've got me. You don't even need the whole title, right?
But
But
knowing Reed Duke, I would believe that he had.
yeah. Oh, yeah. He definitely did. So this article was basically Reed sort of narrating his timeline playing Legacy against specifically one person, and that person was Joe Lissette. So the article went
Ah,
something like this. He was like, "All right, in 2012 is the first time I played against Joe Lissette, and I was playing Natural Order Elves. Joe was playing Miracles, and he defeated me. And then I was wondering, okay, how do I improve at Legacy? How do I get better? I'm going to study Joe as like this sort of like a case, right?"
right.
Excuse me. In 2014, he played against Joe again, and this time Reed was playing Miracles, and Joe was playing Miracles as well, and Joe won again. And continues on. They keep running into each other. Reed switches to like Natural Order Bant. He switches to like some Stoneforge decks, and the one constant that Reed recognized was that every time he battled against Joe, Joe was playing miracles, 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 miracles. And so the secret that Reed had actually like learned was like to get good at legacy and these internal formats in general, you pick one deck and you stick to it. And it doesn't matter
Amen.
if yeah, exactly. It doesn't matter if that deck is the best. But so long as you learn the ins and outs, you learn the nuances, things like when to push, what does it mean in your context when your opponent passes on turn two with like some mana up, things
Yeah.
like that, right? And at that moment, after reading that article, I told myself, all right, I'm going to do this. I'm not going to do it with Show and Tell. I'm going to pick the hardest deck in Legacy, the one that has the most options, the one that has the most that I can learn about. And I'm going to go with it. And at the time, it was, the deck that had the literal card that, had Sensei's Divining Top. But you could activate that 7 times in one turn. You have infinite options with that card, right? So it's like, all right, let's
Mm.
get good with this one. And I just played and played and played and played and played and played and played. And I fell in love. And I mean, at that point, it was blue-eyed everything. Drago on the stack,
Jesus.
swords to plowshares, you name it.
I don't know. See, like I looked at that same era and I came out of it being like, I'm going to master playing elves. Because
Mm.
legacy elves and modern elves, which are
Oh,
two very different decks, but
yeah.
they're so much fun. Like I love playing combo elves. I love drawing a million cards. I mean, it feels very solitaire and it's definitely like this deck will fold to anything. Like, especially now with its stupid like the stupid red elemental just ruins
Oh,
my
Fury,
life.
Fury,
I
yeah, yeah.
hate it so much.
Fury's a very controversial card. I agree with that.
God,
Yeah.
well, I mean, when I'm playing a bunch of one toughness dudes, it just dies. But the point is, though, I think that there's something to be said about taking one deck, especially in competitive formats, especially in internal formats. Take one deck and just become like, I know how to play this deck in every possible format,
Yeah.
against every kind of deck. Like that's why whenever you go and see like legacy or like vintage or modern, whatever kind of tournament list, you'll see people playing the meta decks, and then you'll see like one deck at the bottom, which is like some dude on eggs or some dude on like whatever has been playing this one deck for 30 years is not going to change for you now, and it works, and they get like somewhere mid placement, they cash and they call it a day.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. I think there's something to be said about that, but it's
I
hard because
I do.
Magic keeps giving you stuff to do.
Yeah, yeah. I do wonder sometimes. Like, there are a lot of cool cards coming out. These cards are often very, very strong, and sometimes it's like, I mean, Legacy definitely has gone through some rough patches, right? Like, we've seen Ragavan come and go, Oko, Expressive Iteration, all these sort of cards,
Oh god,
and
iteration.
yeah, exactly, right? And every time these cards are around, I'm kind of just like, okay, well, at some point I have to decide, like, is now finally the moment where I'm gonna, rest my mantle and move on to this really powerful thing that's going on. Yeah, it never really
Nope.
has. Yeah, I guess except for technically Underworld Breach, which was also. I mean, it's a controversial thought that it's probably one of my favorite control combo decks. Just, I know, calling a combo deck control deck, right?
I
Classic, yeah.
I hate
Um,
Breach so much. I mean, look,
yeah, 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 yeah.
I respect it. I respect it a lot, but man, it is trashed Commander, that card.
Oh, but I can only imagine. I
Yeah,
can only
dude. It
imagine.
turns out
Yeah.
you can get to Thassa's Oracle real quickly with that thing. Um, so would you call yourself primarily a legacy player?
Wow, that's interesting
Or like
because
how would you identify yourself if you were in like I'm a commander guy. What do you do?
yeah, I think a year ago I would have said yes, I'm a legacy player. Now today,
Don't tell me you're
this might.
alchemy.
Yeah, yeah. Things are gonna change. I would probably call myself like a coverage person more
Mm.
than anything else, which is kind of strange because I mean, like, and if you had to pin me to a format, I would say legacy and modern now at this point. I think I've sort of like gotten a grasp for the format, but yeah, coverage more so than everything. I think is where I my eyes are right now. Yeah.
That's fair because like coverage and it's interesting that you say like coverage because to be fair, coverage is its own format, right?
Mm,
You have to master all the decks of whatever's being played in that tournament. And you've got like 2 weeks to do it, and then you got to be able to tell people what's going to come out of that deck in 3 seconds.
yep.
Uh, it's miserable and very, very difficult. I love it. I've tried it a few times, and boy, it's hard. It's
Yeah,
real
major
hard.
props to everybody who does this like on the regular because like you're right. Like, I mean, especially I'm actually like, this is interesting that you mentioned that because I'm so terrified to do limited coverage
Oh
for
my
that
god.
exact reason, right? Like, it's week one, day one, you're at this event and like, I don't know the cards, you don't know
You
the
better know
cards, we don't.
350 of them right now.
Like, how? I mean, it's yeah. So, anyways, like all the people on the Pro Tour and Worlds that are learning these cards, and like also not even just like learning like what the cards are, but like how good they are and play patterns and things like
I
that.
think
It's
about like
intense.
the fact that every 2 or 3 months, Marshall needs to learn an
Yeah.
entirely new set of like 400 cards and every possible interaction between them, and be able to tell in Polish or Japanese or whatever card comes off the top that, oh, of course, that's a East Farthing farmer. What else could it be? And like,
Oh my god. I don't even
and
get me
with like
started on.
400 different variants and like
Yes.
foils, and you're
Oh,
like,
oh my goodness. That's the part. That's like the hardest part. Like, you'll hear it frequently, like on cast where it's like, oh yeah, like this is a triome, and don't ask me which one it is because
nobody knows the names of triumphs, man.
yeah,
Come on.
yeah. It's just like, all right, cool. Like, I,
I
I,
think
I, I don't even feel bad that you don't know. Honestly, like, it's your job to know. But like, I give you the pass there. You know what I mean?
My favorite one, I was at GP Oakland some many years ago, and it
Yeah.
was right after the Zendikar expeditions had come out. Now, if
Mm.
you look at the Zendikar expedition from far away, they're all full art and glossy and super foily, and you literally cannot tell one from the other, especially from coverage distance. And this dude was playing like a 4 or 5 color deck, and he's just dropping like shock lands, and you're like, well, that's either a godless shrine or a misty rainforest, but he's got all the colors he needs. So who knows? Good luck.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
It is
exactly. Like,
ridiculous.
you tap your mana one way, and it's good. We get it. You
You know,
cast
we
your spell.
we we trust that whatever you're doing, God bless you for trying to get full play sets like 3 weeks in, but and they're all in Japanese. So we were just like, I don't
Oh,
know what do you want
yeah,
from me?
yeah, yeah.
Oh my god.
Uh,
Okay, but here's the thing. You started playing 10 years ago. Your story starting to sound a lot like Hayu's, which is like, I played like 3 years ago. Then I started mastering like crazy formats, and now I do coverage. And I'm like, What is wrong with you people? It took me like 30 years to get to this point, and you're just like walking in like, oh, I know every card and I can talk about it now. Okay. Um, how did you decide
Yeah,
you wanted to do this?
that's well, I can tell you how I have that skill set. And that actually is completely unrelated to magic. It's just like when I was growing up, like I don't know, maybe this is just like a me specifically, or maybe it's just like a brown person thing in
Brown person
general.
thing.
Yeah. You
We
read my
memorize
mind.
stuff.
Dude, yeah, math tables. I did competitive math for like, 4 or 5 years or whatever. And
I
like
won the geography bee in Massachusetts.
that's what I'm
I'm
talking about. You get it, right? So
yeah.
it's
Spelling
like
bee, geography bees. We just have data.
yeah, exactly. Those intense workloads and like it just like wired my brain to remember certain details really well. Like I'm still very forgetful about certain things. Like if you ask me about music before 2006, I won't be able to tell you a single thing. And that's fine. Like, I mean, it's part of it's a joke now. But like if you ask me like anything about magic, I'm good at like remembering facts that I need to remember.
Okay, I'm
So like
actually I need to tangent off that for a second because we talked about this I think in Vegas even. Why 2006?
that's a really good question. I should ask my wife. I think 2006 is wait, I was 14. Is that when I went
Jesus,
to high
how old are
school?
you now?
31?
Go to hell, buddy. All you infants on my show.
Yeah, granddad, it's time to go to bed. You go home. It's just like carrying you away slowly. Yeah. Uh,
Okay,
um,
so yeah, I was like, what? Did you move here in 2006? Where did you even? No, like because you said that, and that's a very specific year to just be like, this is the
yeah.
year that I know things from.
That was yeah, just like high school. I think that's when like I actually moved from one school to another, and
Mm.
that's when like I guess things just got like different. My parents like sort of started focusing on like my brother and my sister and like their grades and their like lives and things like that. And so that I at that point I was like largely like self autonomous. So I was like that's finally got into like things like Linkin Park and like whatever was popular back then.
That is
And so
also a very traditional brown person story. I definitely
yes,
know the feeling.
yeah. Um,
Yeah. Okay, cool. So, but yeah. So yeah, obviously you've got didactic memory, you know cards and stuff, but how do you get from wanting to play to wanting to describe and cover? How do you even get
True.
into that?
I think this is a really tough question to answer, and I don't have the best
I
words
guess
to
not the
explain it.
general public. How did you get into that?
Yeah. So obviously COVID. And then when we got back, there was an event. It was in Valley Forge. It was a Star City Games event, and it was the first event back from the first like large event back from the pandemic. And people were excited to get back into Magic. People are excited to watch Magic, and that's when Star City announced, I think, that there wouldn't be any coverage of their events. And keep in mind, right? Like we talked about this just now. Like Star City's coverage is like a big deal. Like it was the kind of thing that I would wake up to. It's
Mhm.
like my Saturday morning cartoon, right?
Yeah.
For many people too. And so when they were like, "Hey, we're not doing this anymore," like I don't know. There's like some
I was
larger,
infuriated.
yeah, right. For me, it was just like I couldn't accept that. And some part of me was just like, all right, you have to do something about it. I don't know why it possessed me. Yeah, and it was
Sorry, I
just
didn't
like,
mean to laugh, but that's just like
no, yeah. It was like a I I I don't know where this came from, but I was like, all right, people want this,
yes.
so just give it to them. I mean, at this point, I'd been creating content for a couple years now, for 4 years maybe, and like very much so used to like, all right, like
What content were you making?
so it's just like streaming legacy mostly. I think on Twitch and things like that, and then a couple of
I
YouTube
feel like
videos
I
here and there.
brushed over large chunks of your story somewhere in there, but
We'll
it's
get to
fine.
it as it comes
It's
along.
fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's just like some like desire deep down inside for me to be like, all right, just put it out there, right? Like people want to watch it. It's a high value product. Put it out there, and like it doesn't matter if it's good or bad. Start somewhere
Mm.
and see how it goes. And I mean, obviously there were like certain things about it that were interesting. I wanted to see like, okay, like how do I do this? How will it be received? Like this and that, right? But it was just one of those things where it's like there was a gap in what was being provided and large demand for it. And I think it's important, like people just want to watch those games that are high stakes, right? Like they want
Yeah.
to see the final top deck and things like that. Those are meaningful moments for people. And I was like, all right, well, it'd be a real shame if like like, because I mean, you know how it is, right? Like after every event, I'll run into someone who's like, thank you so much for putting this match online. I'm gonna go back home and I'm gonna watch it, and if it wasn't for you, like we wouldn't be able to do this. Like, it would just be a memory and it would fade away. Now it's on the internet forever, which is a creepy statement, but like it's there and people can watch it and enjoy it, and you know, I don't know, yeah,
You know what that reminds me of? It basically the way Magic coverage started in the first place. Rashad Miller basically created GG's Live and started dragging his own camera equipment to tournaments and just being like, "We're going to tape this. If you're not going to do it, I'm going to do it.
yeah,
Somebody's got to do it." And that's how coverage began. So I'm impressed because like I know like you and I know like Corey Baumeister were basically trying to do things like backpack streams or whatever, but it's I think one thing the audience doesn't realize is how hard it is to do this because the internet is dodgy, getting commentary is dodgy, paying for people, or getting the companies to let you,
yeah,
right? Like that is a lot of communication, a lot of back and forth you have to do.
yeah. Um, I that's something that I've noticed. I mean, like even right now, I'll be working on this stuff someday, and I'll be some days, and I'll just be like, Is this sustainable? How long can I keep doing this? Like, when do I draw the line?" Like, no, seriously. Like, I
No,
mean, like
that's fair.
once I have a kid, I'm just like, I'm gonna put this down. I'm gonna, focus on my life, my family more, things like that. You just have to, right? Like, and
Yeah.
so sometimes I'm just like, all right, well, if I'm not doing this, who's going to the next SCG or MXP or that event? Who's gonna put like, lights and cameras on the players? Who's gonna, share their
Yeah.
stories? And I don't
Who's
know.
going to be the
It's
next BDM? Who's going to be the next
yeah,
person who
yeah, yeah,
tells us about
exactly.
like give somebody a goal to attain, right?
Yeah.
Like
And
I think
then
yeah, go ahead.
oh yeah, yeah, and then I mean, naturally, like a lot of the things that you mentioned. I mean, like I don't talk about it a lot, but like part of the whole process is like okay, like uh, carrying literal 200 pounds of coverage, like items with me on a plane,
Yeah.
flying, all that sort of stuff. It does add up. There's a lot to it. Learning all the tech stuff. I mean, I had to invent a lot of this stuff because, well, it just wasn't publicly accessible, and now
Mm.
now it's there, which is kind of cool. So it's very challenging, but it's also one of those things like it's a nice project to have been working on. Like, when I first got into Legacy, like the an older version of this was like foiling out my miracles deck. And like I would, really, really just like die hard, I would really get into it. Now this is something a bit more meaningful for the community. And same way, I think it's just like
And perhaps a more transferable skill if you need to later.
yeah, exactly, right? And so it's just like, yeah, looking at like this work and constantly the thought in the back of my mind is like, all right, what's the next step? How do I improve this? What is some feedback that I got, or like things like just ideas like absorbing from like a WotC broadcast, a Riot broadcast, or this thing or that thing, like always looking for how to improve. I don't know.
Yeah, there's definitely a lack of community memory in terms of being able to pass on these like because like Star City stopped or WotC stopped or any of these like big coverage companies that had all this institutional memory didn't pass it on when they decided to end the coverage. So you're basically left starting from scratch. I mean, you've got something you can look at and be like, okay, I can figure it out and emulate it and copy it. But there's a lot of like random details in the back end that we just don't know until we're in there. And then you have to like one of the things is because I am who I am, I go backstage at all these like Magic Cons and say hi to all my friends there. And when I went backstage in Vegas and I saw like Rich Hagon's spaceship that he lives in with the hundreds of monitors and all it's pitch black and you see all this like television equipment and all this stuff going on. And I'm like, man, this is a far cry from what it used to look like at a GP where it's like three cameras and two
Hmm.
dudes with microphones and we're calling it a day. This is like a professional full on production.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
if they decide to stop and don't tell anybody how this is done, we're going to lose who knows how much just institutional information of how to do this. And I think that's a real shame as a person who cares about, cultural transmission. This is a thing that matters a lot to me in terms of just like the fact that we can go back and look at ESPN2 tapes of like 1998 Pro Tour finals with Mike Turian or whatever is rad. And the
oh
fact that
yeah,
there's like a whole span of time where we lost all that because nobody was doing coverage or nobody cared or couldn't afford it is just like I don't want to lose these things. I think this is worthwhile to keep. So when I see folks like you actually trying to pick up this mantle and put it together best I can, it feels like future archaeologists looking back and trying to be like, how can we save this culture? Or like a sci-fi game where you're looking at the ruins of the past and trying to rebuild what they did.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
No, no, yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, there are a couple other people out there who are doing the same thing. Like
Yeah.
mostly stores like NRG, Apex. They've
Hmm.
got their coverage circuits and things like that, which is really awesome. But yeah, I think I think there. Well, also I think there's another big thing too, which is like uh just realizing like when you factor in like all the costs and expenses and things like that, like the
Hmm.
number one benefit of like this current iteration, this current era of coverage is that like it's just there are ways to do it cheaply. Like like don't get me wrong, I love the Pro Tour coverage. I think the Pro Tour coverage coming out of Philly onwards is maybe our best iteration of official Wizards provided coverage, period. But like I have to estimate that that's going to cost like just to me it's speculating, right? That must cost like at least $500,000 per
Easy
show
peasy.
with all the lights and
More.
cameras and like you mentioned behind the scenes, right? There's like 40 people working there, one on each computer, that kind of thing, right? Um the way that I do it is like very cheap. Like, you know what I
Hmm.
mean? And it's like just it's like long term it's something that like could be accessible to a lot of other people and maybe for non-pro tour events is something that is like, actually feasible to make happen. You can't have a half a million show for every single Star City Games event. That's just like
Yeah.
yeah, that just wouldn't
It's
work. Like
unsustainable. But,
right,
like, you
exactly.
look at, like, CDH tournaments, which are starting to pick up stream and stuff like that. Yeah, it's expensive, but at the same time, it's something that 2 people with a couple of cameras in their backpack can do. And
Yeah.
I think we've started to get, like, with a laptop and a couple of cameras, you can definitely set up a professional looking stream. Lighting helps a lot, but,
Mhm.
like, even now, lighting, you can kind of fold it and fake it and shove it in there.
Yeah,
I
the
don't
secret
think.
is
Yeah,
the
go.
secret is like you actually just don't need anything fancy. I remember my first broadcast, it was just like my phone and like a tripod. That was it.
I fear what your internet cost must be, or
Oh,
your
oh
phone
yeah.
bill, your.
Actually, it's funny because I found cheap solutions, so it's not nearly as bad as I was expecting it to be. Like if you probably know this already, right? Like, but if you go to like a venue, for example, Smart City will charge you like thousands and thousands of dollars. So
Mhm.
like right now, the alternate was just like to buy a bunch of hotspots and like figure out some techie solution to like
Yeah.
merge them all together, and it's possible, and it's like still a recurring cost, like $300 a show or something, but like
Yeah, but $300 is much better.
that you're literally shaving a zero off. So
Yeah,
yeah,
right.
I'll take that. And even if there are hiccups, like even if there's a little bit of failure, I'm paying like 10% of the price. I'm cool with it. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
we do what
Just
we
buy a
can with
bunch of
what we
SIM
have.
cards and call it good, right? Like, whatever.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Um, it's like those are the things that people don't think about. Like, they don't think
yeah,
about what internet costs. Like, you can't just do this. I mean, you can do it off your phone. It just costs a lot, and you burn through your data real
yeah,
quickly. And like, your phone company's gonna be like, you seem to be using like 85% of your data this one weekend. Is that okay? And
yeah.
you're like,
So someone take your phone, like hello,
well, it's
secure,
like,
like yeah.
look,
It's funny
bro,
because
there was a Death Right Trauma Mirror match. I had to do it.
Cedric has always been talking about, like you'll see on Twitter, he'll be like, people don't really know the true costs of coverage, and uh, unsurprisingly, it wasn't until I started doing everything from the ground up that I learned, okay, this is actually really expensive, and I understand now why someone might want to say, no, I don't think it's worth it to do this because it's just very, very, very expensive. So like, it's reasonable. I maybe just chalk myself up to being a little bit crazy to constantly want to do it, but I think
You're
that's
young and have energy.
exactly right. Well, I mean, okay, fine, fine. I'm 31. I can't say I'm old. I can't say I'm older to you. So,
I
but
have a decade on you, man. Chill out.
um, it's an interesting project. I'll say that so far, and I think that's what's really got me going. Is that like I've just got a lot of drive to take something that's like potentially possible and potentially great and slightly broken and just like working on it. It's like as if this was my car and I was just like yeah, I've got a wrench. That's kind of what it is. It's like
Yeah,
bit by bit.
I mean, I think it's really laudable because I love coverage. I think coverage is one of those things that, like, I mean, everybody's like, "Oh, you're a casual." I'm like, "Yeah, but that's what I do. What I enjoy is listening to people playing pro Magic and covering it and hearing that coverage." And it's important to me that people are trying guerrilla ways to save these things and to keep it going because that's such a fundamental part of Magic culture.
Yeah.
Even if the game is flowing more towards casual and relaxed play, we still want to be able to hear what happens when LSV sits down against, like,
Oh yeah.
Paulo Vitor Damarosa or something, right? Like, those are things we care about because they're fun to watch. That's crazy Magic. Like, the top 8 at the Worlds was insane. I loved it. I would have
Yeah,
been
I
so
100%
sad
agree.
if we didn't get that.
Yeah.
I'm sad that we didn't get coverage of your games, man. Congratulations on winning one of the 4 brainstorms that exists in the world. How was that?
That was honestly kinda crazy. The
I
whole
didn't even know
event.
you were playing in the thing until somebody came up and was like, "Yeah, man, one of my friends circle one." I'm like, "Really? Who?" Anu, and I'm like, "What the hell?" I saw
Yeah.
you in the little Pro Tour area just playing games. I was like, "Oh, I wonder he must be doing some side event or something." Yeah, it turns out it was the side event.
The side event, right? Yeah, that was honestly, like, a very interesting experience. It was so I'll just give you, like, the high level for
Yeah,
anybody who's
please.
listening and doesn't know. So it's the Secret Lair Showdown, and to play in this 32-person event, you have to actually qualify in a couple events that are, played, the days before. So those are, like, top 8 of those events, there's 4 of them, that gives you 32, simple math, and then after that, it's single elimination. So even the qualifiers are single elimination. You have to 5-0 in order to make it, and after that, it's elimination per round until you have one single person left. And what's really interesting is, and maybe this is just my 2 cents on it, but like first place is obviously like, it's the brainstorm and the big brainstorm card, and then second place is a secret layer, just like a random secret layer. And so you could see that there's like a it gets a little tense because like the drop off is like it's like very top loaded,
It's
right?
like going right off the cliff. There's not even it's not
Yeah,
even
yeah, yeah,
comparable.
yeah.
It's like
Yeah, exactly. So each game is like really stressful because it's just
yeah.
like, well, if I'm out here, dang, that's like, hopes and dreams crushed. Single elimination is really interesting too because like
What format was it specifically?
so this was modern. Yeah, this was all modern. And the reason single elimination is interesting is because well, what happens when you go to time, right? There's no draws.
Oh.
So yeah, so they implement a special gameplay solution which is called sudden death. It does exist in Magic, and it's basically whoever has the most life at the end of turns is the winner, and then whoever has yeah, and whoever has, I guess, like if you start game 3 in time, then it's like whoever takes the first piece of damage or technically gains life. I guess you could like solitude on turn 1
What?
and win before you. Yeah. Guess what deck is not very good at having a higher life total than your opponent? That's right, control, which is what I was playing.
I was just saying, I'm
So
like, what are you on Death Shadow? What's going on?
so every game was like not just a race against my opponent, but also the clock to make sure that I could actually like play things out. And I will say that certainly did make it much more intense. I mean, honestly, like, I don't know if I would run it back. That's how tense it was. But the whole event was really cool because like there's a lot of people that I knew in the top 32. Even in the finals, I got to play against my friend Nam. A couple times I played against other people that I knew, like Chase Masters and so on. And
Yeah,
I
Chase was
think
the one who told me you won, and I was like, "What the hell? That sounds cool."
yeah, yeah. And so I was honestly, it was cool. I haven't played an event like that. It didn't even hit me like how like sizable this event was until, like I had won and I was just like, "Oh,
Well, it's funny because, like, in
wow.
Philly, when they did this first Secret Lair event, there were, like, 40 people in it. There was something
Wow."
like you could have lost you could have gone down to the top like, prizes went to, like, 38 of the 40 competitors or something. It was that ridiculous, like, they and then, of course, in Minnesota, everybody had seen, like, "Wait, they get a Ragavan and, like, a whatever?" And suddenly there's, like, 1,000 people playing, and you're like,
Yeah.
"Oh, oh,
Yeah,
GG's, buddy."
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
all the Pro Tour people who failed out of the Pro Tour were like, "Well, I guess I'll do the Secret Lair challenge instead."
That's the other thing too. It's just like you don't know who you're gonna run into. Like I think my top 4 opponent, their name was Brent, and Brent was just so good. Didn't have a great Worlds performance, but like by the way that they were playing,
They were in Worlds. That's
yeah,
really the
yeah,
beginning and end of the sentence.
right,
Okay.
exactly. I was just like sweating the whole time. Like they did everything perfectly, and
Yeah, these guys are all
it's
playing the same scam deck that they were trying to use to win Worlds or whatever.
yeah. And so it's like that's when you're just kind of realize like when you play against the perfect opponent, like what do you have to do? You just have to play out of your mind. And so I guess maybe that's something that's kind of interesting too. Is like one thing that I do miss about like not playing in all these events because I go to coverage and like a lot of the a question I get a lot of the time is like, hey, do you miss like saying spells? Say, hell yeah, I do. Yeah, I kind of realized like the sort of like adrenaline of like having to just be better than somebody, like alluding to like way
Mhm.
back when my friend was beating me in high school, like I definitely do miss it sometimes. And
Well,
so
yeah, like, I remember I was talking to Randy Bueller once. Randy Bueller,
yeah.
Hall of Famer, one of the main coverage guys, used to work at WotC, his wife still works there, and I was like, "What do you miss?" He's like, "Dude, I miss grinding out against, like, other players. I miss having to challenge myself because, WotC employees are not allowed to play in tournaments
Hmm.
because, they know the cards are coming in, they've got edges." But he's like, "You know how hard it is for somebody who's a Hall of Famer, who's, like, one of the most competitive people in the game to not be allowed to play anymore?" I'm like,
Oh yeah.
"That does suck.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
guess you should have been a worse player, buddy."
oh no, yeah, exactly. But it was nice to sort of like rekindle that, and I will say like I try to play like what I can online when I can, but I mean
It's not the same. It's
it's
not
just
the
not the
sweat's
same.
not the
Yeah, yeah,
same,
yeah, yeah,
man.
yeah, exactly, right.
Like,
Like
when you're in a tournament and you're like, "Oh, I can see that poster that I'm gonna win right there," and the dude in front of it reminds me of, like, the first time I came back to Magic in 2011, I went to, Worlds, which was in San Francisco, and I was just drafting, and I'd never drafted before because I was just like, "Oh, I've heard about it, and it's a $5 draft, I'll do it, whatever." You know who drafts on a Wednesday at Worlds? Team Finland drafts on a Wednesday at Worlds. Team Japan is drafting. They're just practicing for Worlds, and I'm here like, I'm back to Magic for the first time in 15 years. "Hi, guys," and they're like, "What the hell are you doing?" Like, "I don't know. I just want the zombies," and they're like, "You are ruining my practice." Dude, let me tell you about so I was on the plane ride home from Vegas, and dude next to me was just going through a pack, and of course, Magic players, you see somebody with the pack of cards, you can start talking to him. And I started talking to him, and he's like, "Yeah, I started playing 7 months ago, and I went and I decided I want to do a PTQ, so I went to Vegas." And I'm like, "Okay, fair, but also Vegas." And he's like, and I like made it through. I played through all 7 rounds of day one. It was very long, and I'm like, "Wow, that's impressive right there for your first PTQ. Well done." And he's like, "Yeah, but I kept getting schooled by all these dudes in uniforms and team jerseys and stuff." I'm like, "Yeah, because the people playing the PTQ of Vegas are the guys who failed out of Worlds." And he's like, "Worlds?" And I'm like, "Yeah, the big tournament that was being played there, World Championships." And he's like,
Oh my.
"Oh." Yeah, because he's like, "Yeah, a bunch of the top 16 guys afterwards who were watching me draft or something, they invited me to come up and draft with them later. And they said, 'Yeah, you don't get to keep any of the cards, but we're drafting for money.'" And he's like, "Sure, I'll do that." And it turns out, so he basically went upstairs and hung out and money drafted with like, the top 16 of the 100K. And they were just like fleecing him. You know, but he's like, "I
That's
learned a lot about Magic," and I'm like, "You're insane! You went money drafting against people I wouldn't money draft against, and I know how to
Yeah.
do this."
Oh my goodness. That reminds me of like a Smash story. I watched a documentary a long time ago, like Super Smash Brothers Melee. It's a
Mm.
person whose name was KDJ, and like the way he got really good was he would just like walk up to everybody that he knew would beat him, and he's like, "Hey, $5 money match, let's go." And he would lose, and then he would improve, and then he would
Yeah.
lose again and improve. And I mean, I don't know if that's the intention here, but
No,
that's
this guy,
crazy. I mean,
yeah, he came out of it though. He had like a smile on his face. He was definitely like,
I
"Look,
love
I
that.
know I was out of my league, but I learned a lot and it was really cool." And I'm like, "Good. Next time, go listen to limited resources and come back and let's try this again. You like just picked up drafting like 2 weeks ago. Maybe
That'd
this
be
is."
so cool if you just met this person like next year in Vegas or
And
something.
they're really like into talking. I'm like, "Yeah,
Yeah,
let's
exactly,
go."
right? Yeah.
Y- It's I mean, I love those kind of stories though. Um, so man, this is so weird though, because like did when you started doing professional things with Wizards too, right? Like, haven't you been on some of the official broadcasts?
Yeah, so I did, I worked for the Pro Tour Philly show, which was
Mm.
pretty cool. I do a lot of work behind the scenes on the DreamHack RC broadcast as well, which is also amazing. And then recently, I've been working with Daybreak in creating the Modern Super League, and I'm really looking
Yeah,
forward
like,
to it.
I've been
Yeah,
really enjoying watching those for one thing.
it's been
Uh,
so awesome. I
Explain the
cannot.
Super League to people.
Yeah, so the spiel I usually give is back in 2014. So Randy, we mentioned earlier, he actually just put together like this like super ensemble of
It
like
was like an invitational.
basically it was an invitational with a bunch of celebrity players, and Randy loves playing vintage, and so that's what this was. It was just a vintage league where people just battled against each other, and then after they finished playing against each other, they'd come back and they would do commentary of the other people in
It
the
was
event
so much
playing,
fun. I love
which
Vintage
is
Super League so much.
insane, right? And what I love about that is like, when we watch the Pro Tour, we get to hear like Paul Cheon, Marshall, Corey, and so on. But like this is an opportunity where you get to hear like your favorite players talk about the game. And like, so this time around we've brought it back, for the modern Super League. And what's changed since 2014 is that we've got a lot of new players in who've just become phenomenal over time. Like we have Nathan Stoyer in the league. We have Mason Clark,
The
Jesse
fact that you
Robkin.
got Carmen and Gavin from friggin' WotC
Yes.
to do anything like this is amazing to me.
So cool, so cool, yeah. And then just being able to hear them talk about like, like small anecdotes, right? Like, I mean, I'm sure it doesn't necessarily beat like Luis talking about like Luis Scott Vargas talking about like, oh, back in my day when I played Necropotence, but like hearing like, Nathan go like, well, we were testing for the Pro Tour, a couple months ago, and we found that like this card overperformed, and you're just like gobbling it all up because like where else do you get that kind of like
Exactly.
information? It's like it's so cool that, and like I think the part about it that I love is that it really showcases like the human aspect of these people that are just like legends in my mind. You know what I mean? But
Exactly.
they're just people that are like you and me. I mean,
And the thing
you're a
that makes
legend
me
too,
laugh,
honestly.
I'm just a dude who talks into a box. But the thing that I love about this is that you put the people who fought against each other as commentary for the next match. So between like nothing happening on the match, they're sitting there talking about their own matches. Like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, man, what did you do on turn 5? How could you possibly have known that was going to come? And I'm like, yes, this is what I want to know. I want to, because that's like when you're in person, in paper, and they're playing games. When you're scooping up your cards, you're talking like, wow, that was a really good turn 3. And so you get that same vibe here of these guys sitting and breaking down their games and like seeing how it went for them. And I was like, this is rad. Did you ever see GP Redmond? The GP Richmond where Reed Duke was both the main guy and commentating on his own matches? Literally the
Yeah,
most insane commentary of all time.
don't watch round 15. I won't get into that too much. But yeah, that was a sweet. I played against him in round 15 actually.
Right.
Yeah. That was honestly like that idea was just like a revolutionary. Whoever's idea it was, like 10 million props because
Only
so
Reed could
amazing.
do that. Only Reed could get away
Yeah.
with both playing a tournament and commentating simultaneously the same damn tournament. And I'm like, first off, how did you not just die? But secondly, being able to hear him go back over his own games in real time was nutter butters. It's like the kind of insight you just don't get. So yeah, I really love watching the Super League, and I think it's really cool that it came back because one of my favorite ones is early in like one of the first Super Leagues or first or second Super Leagues. Bueller had brought a dude on who had never played Vintage or Legacy or whatever, and so he just brought a modern deck and replaced the Shocklands with True Duels. And I was like,
Okay.
"Oh, homie, this is not going to end well for you."
Yeah.
And you run right into mud, and you're just like, "Oh, right, I
Yeah,
can't
you
cast
could
any
do
spells anymore." GG's.
Ancient Tomb. Yeah, just
Oh,
like
huh? You have a Soul Ring every turn, you say, or friggin' Mishra's Workshop.
yeah.
Lodestone Golem? Okay, well, I guess I'm just not playing anymore. Um,
Gosh, those were the days.
God,
Yeah.
I love Vintage. I cannot play Vintage, but I love watching Vintage
Yes.
because
Yeah.
my
Oh
brain
yeah.
is not big enough for Vintage.
Dude, speaking of like, there was literally a story, and this is like why the Vintage Super League is awesome, right? Like, I just remember a story where like I think it was Luis Scott Vargas playing against Matt, not Sperling, Matt Costa. That's what it was. He was playing against Matt Costa, and Matt Costa was playing this like blue red tempo style deck in Vintage, and Luis was just playing like Oath of Druids, and through some insane stack, it's like, all right, I'm going to cast my Ancestral Recall. Matt goes Pyroblast. I go Flusterstorm. And then Luis goes, all right, here's Black Lotus. And then finishes the stack. All right, cool. You countered my Ancestral Recall. Hard cast Gristlebrand. And like those kind of stories, like just like how big brain he calculated the whole thing out. It's that's
so
what
good. Oh,
only in Vintage, just Vintage things.
Yeah, I was just sitting there. I'm like, a Vintage game only lasts 5 rounds. It's just that each of those rounds is an hour.
Yeah.
Like that turn, there's like 38 cards on the stack, and you're like, I don't know what's happening anymore.
It's
Oh god
crazy
damn,
stuff. Yeah.
I love Vintage so much. Oh man. All right, so I've got to ask you, since this is the first time I've had another Indian on the show, which is first off, like you and I both met the same kid, albeit in Vegas, who was like
Oh,
the
it was
only
such a
two.
pleasant experience,
Yeah, and I
man.
was like, he was like, you guys are like the only brown folk I know. And I'm like, yeah, Anuraag's sitting right there. And he's like, holy crap, he's right there. And I'm
He
like,
said the same thing. He was like, "Yeah." I was like, "Shivam's over there." He's like, "Oh yeah, I just talked to him."
yeah. So isn't it like I was just thinking about that? I'm like, isn't it hella weird that like we're a nerd culture? How did we just not all end up playing Magic all the time? You would
Yeah,
think like
I,
this is like right up our alley.
that is a really good question. I mean, I did get into it pretty late because I just didn't know about it. How did I stumble onto Magic? Honestly, right? Is like I
Yeah,
had nothing
seriously.
else to do. Right? There was nobody in my college that would play like any other games. And then I think like I guess the other question is like what took us so long to sort of like meet each other, right? Because like
yeah,
I mean, I'm gonna be real with you. Like I don't know, maybe you talked about this with other people, but just like it matters that there are other people like me,
yeah.
just that play this game, and
It
so
matters a lot. It for a
yeah.
long time, I thought I was literally the only one, and then I saw, like, some dude, Tariq Patel, win, like, a vintage tournament or something. I'm like, "I know that surname. Oh my god, there's another
Yeah.
one." And then,
Yeah.
like, I met Usman and I met, like, some of the other folks who were, like, just hardcore, like I'm like, "Okay, well, great. There's, like, a handful, one hand."
Yeah.
But here we
I don't
are.
know, just
I don't
relatable, like, experiences and things like that,
Yeah,
It's just
seriously.
it's nice to know that other people, like,
I just think
enjoy.
it's I mean, it's not like you don't need that, but it's cool to know that you're not the only
Mm.
one.
Yeah,
And then
yeah,
you're
yeah,
just
yeah.
like, "Oh, that's cool. We have other things we can relate with."
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
but then, of course, they make Kaladesh, and we get 7-Eleven jokes, and you're like, "Okay, well, now what do we do?"
I remember that one, that was kind of awkward. That
Yeah,
was
that was
extremely
not
awkward, in fact, yeah.
yeah, dude, when Mark Rosewater comes out and he's like, "Man, I wish I had made another convenience store joke," and I'm like, "Bro, let me talk to you. We're friends,
That they I don't yeah,
bro."
that is not the hill that we wanna die on.
No,
Yeah, exactly, exactly, yeah. Um, but yeah,
this
I
is
mean,
not
I know I'm saying, like, I'm just, like, sort of really just re-emphasizing that one thing, but, like, it's nice, I think, a lot of experiences that we are able to sort of like share, like I mean just like small things matter a lot, like I, I wish I had words to really explain it. I'm actually out of a loss for words, but like
yeah.
it is one of those things that's just like really profound to me.
It
So
because there's, like, things that we deal with and, like,
mhm.
weird microaggressions and weird just, like, life experiences that we share that we go through with dealing with it, and it's like yeah, it's a card game. It's an international card game. It's
Competitive
played by
math and geography, bang,
yeah,
like that, you
right?
know what I mean, like
Exactly.
you know what it's like, yeah.
Yeah, like, we have we have a lot of cultural relations together, but it's also sometimes just getting stopped by security to get your Magic cards checked when everybody else with Magic cards just walked on through, and you're like, "Oh, man," coming home from Richmond after SCG's, Command Fest, and me and Krim walk through, we're literally the only ones in the airport, and they literally strip searched me in the middle of the lobby
No.
because and I was like, Krim is walking through with a leather jacket covered in spikes, like literally spikes, and all this. He's got bright blue hair, and I'm like, I'm not saying I love Krim. He's one of my best friends, but like, homie, like if you're gonna pick straight laced generic dude and that, and they're like, no, I need you to stop and take off all
That's
your
some
clothes in the middle
BS
of the
right
thing.
there, yeah.
And he was looking at me like, what the hell are you doing? I'm like, yeah, don't worry about it. It's just brown things. It's fine.
Yeah, 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 but like that's what I'm saying. It's just like we get it, right? Like
Yeah,
there's sometimes a higher chance that this kind of thing might happen, or just like
fancy that.
yeah, you know what I mean? It's just like I don't know, yeah.
It's weird sometimes. It's weird. Like being the only ones in the room. Sometimes you're like, this is odd. But it's
Yeah.
also like, we grew up
The
in
other day,
America,
I
man, we're
actually
used to it.
I went to in Vegas. I went to a buffet, like an Indian buffet. Like we all went there, and I don't know, man. Like I was about to like tear off my piece of naan and eat it with my hand, just like I normally do.
Yeah.
And I noticed, I looked to the left, I looked to the right, and everybody is just like eating with like fork and knife, which is like you could do that too. But it was just like in
No,
that
you
moment, I
can't.
was like, wait a minute, all right, just like
This
yeah, be cool. You know
mm-mm.
what I mean?
I
So
would have been like, "Ugh, hands,
yes,
this is
exactly.
let me teach
Yeah,
all of you.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
now put down your chai tea and let's
Yeah, dude, the
yeah.
Spider-Man scene, chai tea,
Oh
like
god.
that was so
Oh,
cool
that's so
too.
good. That's so
Yes,
good.
yes. I was like, oh my god, I
You
get you.
understand. You
Yes.
understand.
uh, this is
Every
literally what I'm
Indian
talking about, right? The fact that I don't even have to finish my sentence, and you're
ah,
just like, I
yes, yes.
got you, like.
But it irks me that you live literally 20 minutes away and we have not actually just hung out. Come on, homie. This
You're
is
right. No, you're 100% right
like
about that.
we don't have
Yeah.
excuses anymore.
That is absolutely true. Yeah, I'm gonna
Ah.
just like I send another tweet. You want to get lunch tomorrow or something like that? You know what I mean? Like easy, get it done.
Yeah, man. Anyways, dude, it was lovely to talk to you. Thank you so much for coming on.
I had a
And
blast. Thank you.
yeah, if folks want to find you and like the Super League and stuff, where do they go?
Yeah, so twitch.tv/unzidmtg. That's ANZIDMTG. Twitter, YouTube. I have like 6 TikToks, but it's too much work.
We're gonna have to start picking that stuff up, man.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's never ending. There's so much to do. But anywhere there, unzidmtg. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm an open book. If you have any questions about coverage or modern or this or that, being brown, like, hey, we'll talk about it, man. I'm so cool with that. But yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks. And as always, my friends, you can find me at Gear Report Gears. You can find this podcast anywhere podcasts are sold, or at Cool Stuff Inc. on Tuesdays, or at YouTube on Tuesdays. Thank you to my editor, EK. And remember, my friends, it is not magic without the gathering, and we will see you next time.